There comes a time in life when the scales tip, when the burdens of an action outweigh its rewards. Travel, for all its wonder and excitement, is one such endeavor that, past a certain age, becomes less of an adventure and more of a perilous gamble. Today, I will lay out for you 6 irrefutable reasons why, after the age of 60, you must reconsider the costs of wandering too far from home. The body, once a reliable vessel for adventure and endurance, begins its slow but inevitable rebellion as the years accumulate. What was once a minor inconvenience, a stiff joint after a long flight, a slight headache from dehydration, transforms into a persistent, nagging reminder of mortality. The knees that once carried you up mountains now protest at the mere thought of a staircase. The back that once bore heavy luggage without complaint now seizes up after an hour in a cramped airplane seat. The hands that once deftly navigated foreign subway maps now fumble with unfamiliar currency, their grip weakening with each passing year. The circulatory system, once a well-oiled machine, begins to falter under the stress of prolonged immobility during long-haul flights. Deep vein thrombosis, a silent killer, lurks in the pressurized cabins of airplanes, preying on those whose veins no longer pump blood with youthful efficiency. Swollen ankles and aching calves become more than just discomfort. They are warning signs of a body no longer equipped to handle the unnatural conditions of modern travel. The heart, that tireless engine, now labors under the strain of disrupted sleep, erratic mealtimes, and the low-grade panic of navigating unfamiliar terrain. The lungs, once capable of breathing deeply in high altitudes or polluted cities, now struggle to adapt. Air quality in many travel destinations, whether from smog, dust, or wildfire smoke, can trigger coughing fits, shortness of breath, or even full-blown respiratory distress. What was once an exhilarating hike through a foreign landscape now becomes a wheezing ordeal, each step a reminder that oxygen no longer flows as freely as it once did. The body's ability to recover from such strain diminishes, leaving fatigue lingering for days instead of hours. The digestive system, once an ironclad fortress against exotic foods and questionable street vendors, now rebels at the slightest deviation from routine. A meal that would have been an adventurous delight in younger years now becomes a gamble, with heartburn, indigestion, or worse lurking as potential consequences. The gut's microbiome, finely tuned to a lifetime of familiar foods, struggles to adapt to foreign spices, unfamiliar cooking oils, or even just the stress of irregular eating schedules. What should be a pleasure, sampling local cuisine, becomes a minefield of discomfort and regret. The immune system, once a vigilant defender against pathogens, now falters in the face of new bacteria and viruses. A simple cold caught on a plane can escalate into bronchitis or pneumonia, with recovery time stretching into weeks rather than days. Exotic illnesses that might have been shrugged off in youth now pose serious threats, as the body's ability to mount a robust defense wanes. Vaccinations and medications, while helpful, cannot fully compensate for the natural decline in immune vigilance. The musculoskeletal system, once a framework of strength and flexibility, now creaks under the weight of age. Cartilage wears thin, joints stiffen, and muscles lose their elasticity. Lugging suitcases through airports, standing in long security lines, or even just walking for hours through cobblestone streets becomes an exercise in pain management. The spine, compressed by decades of gravity, protests against unfamiliar beds and poorly designed hotel mattresses, turning what should be rest into a nightly battle for comfort. The skin, once resilient against sun, wind, and dry climates, now thins and frays. Sunburns come more easily and heal more slowly. Dry air in airplanes and hotels leaches moisture from the body, leaving skin itchy and cracked. Minor cuts and scrapes, once trivial, now take longer to heal and are more susceptible to infection. The body's largest organ, once a durable shield, now betrays its fragility at every turn. The nervous system, once a lightning-fast network of reflexes and reactions, now slows to a crawl. Balance becomes precarious, making uneven sidewalks, crowded markets, or slippery tiles in hotel bathrooms into genuine hazards. The startle reflex, dulled by age, leaves you slower to react to sudden dangers. A speeding scooter, a pickpocket's quick hands, or a misstep on a steep staircase. The brain's ability to process new information, foreign languages, complex transit maps, rapidly changing schedules, diminishes, leaving you vulnerable to confusion and mistakes. The endocrine system, once a finely tuned regulator of energy and mood, now struggles to adapt to the chaos of travel. Jet lag, once a minor annoyance, now wreaks havoc on sleep patterns, sometimes taking weeks to fully resolve. Cortisol levels spike under the stress of missed connections, lost reservations, or language barriers, but the body's ability to recover from such spikes weakens. The delicate balance of hormones that once kept moods stable now falters, leaving you more susceptible to irritability, anxiety, or even depression in unfamiliar surroundings. The sensory organs, once sharp and reliable, now deliver distorted or diminished signals. Eyes strain to read small print on boarding passes or restaurant menus, even with corrective lenses. Ears struggle to filter out background noise in bustling train stations or crowded streets, making communication difficult. The nose and taste buds, dulled by age, rob food of its former pleasure, turning what should be a culinary adventure into a bland necessity. The world, once vivid and immersive, now feels muffled and distant. The bladder and prostate, once obedient, now demand constant attention. Long flights or bus rides without easy bathroom access become torturous exercises in discomfort. The fear of not finding a restroom in time turns simple outings into sources of low-grade anxiety. The body's internal clock, once predictable, now misfires, waking you at odd hours or demanding urgent trips to the bathroom at the most inconvenient moments. The feet, once sturdy foundations for exploration, now ache after even short walks. Bunions, plantar fasciitis, or thinning fat pads on the soles turn every step into a reminder of decay. Shoes that were once comfortable now seem to conspire against you, rubbing blisters or pinching nerves. The simple joy of wandering through a new city becomes a painful march from one bench to the next. The hands, once capable of fine motor skills, now tremble or stiffen. Zippers, buttons, and luggage locks become frustrating puzzles. Gripping a suitcase handle or maneuvering a carry-on into an overhead bin becomes a test of endurance. The loss of dexterity turns simple tasks, opening a water bottle, handling foreign coins, or even just signing a receipt, into minor ordeals. The voice, once strong and clear, now wavers or cracks under strain. Attempting to communicate in a foreign language, once an exciting challenge, now becomes exhausting as vocal cords tire and throat muscles weaken. The frustration of not being understood or of struggling to hear responses saps the joy from interactions that should be enriching. The cumulative effect of these betrayals is a body that can no longer be trusted. What was once a reliable partner in adventure now feels like a fragile, unpredictable liability. The thrill of discovery is overshadowed by the constant awareness of vulnerability, the gnawing sense that any misstep could lead to a fall, any missed meal to dizziness, any minor illness to a hospital stay. The body, once a tool for experiencing the world, now becomes the very thing that keeps you from it. The mind, once a precision instrument capable of rapid calculations and effortless adaptation, begins to lose its edge as the years advance. The cognitive agility that once made navigating foreign cities, deciphering transit maps, or negotiating with vendors second nature now falters under the weight of accumulated time. Processing speed slows. What was once an instantaneous assessment of a situation now requires deliberate, laborious thought. The mental reflexes that once allowed you to pivot seamlessly between languages, currencies, or cultural norms now stutter, leaving gaps where confidence once resided. Memory, the bedrock of experience, begins to fray at the edges. Names, directions, even the simple sequence of steps required to board a train or check into a hotel now demand conscious effort. Where once you could effortlessly recall phrases in a foreign tongue or the layout of an airport terminal, now you find yourself grasping at half-remembered details, straining against the fog of forgetfulness. The frustration of misplaced passports, forgotten gate numbers, or blanking on a critical word in conversation turns what should be a smooth journey into a series of small humiliations. Decision-making, once swift and assured, becomes sluggish under the weight of diminished executive function. The ability to weigh risks, filter distractions, and choose the optimal path weakens, leaving you vulnerable to poor judgments. A scam that would have been obvious at 40 now slips past your defenses. A poorly planned detour that once would have been a minor inconvenience now spirals into exhaustion and confusion. The mental stamina required to navigate complex itineraries, sudden changes, or high-pressure situations erodes, leaving you more susceptible to stress-induced errors. Multitasking, once an unconscious skill, now fractures under the slightest pressure. Attempting to listen to an announcement in a noisy terminal while keeping track of luggage and searching for a boarding pass becomes an overwhelming cognitive load. The brain, no longer able to efficiently compartmentalize tasks, defaults to a plodding singular focus, a dangerous liability in environments that demand split-second awareness. The once easy act of hailing a cab while mentally converting currency and monitoring your surroundings now feels like juggling with lead weights. Spatial reasoning, the silent navigator that once guided you effortlessly through labyrinthine streets and unfamiliar terrain, dulls with age. The mental map that allowed you to retrace steps, estimate distances, or intuitively sense direction now blurs, leaving you disoriented in crowds or relying on devices that may fail. The confidence that once came from an innate sense of place gives way to anxiety, every unfamiliar alleyway a potential maze, every unmarked turn a source of unease. Attention, once a laser beam, now scatters like diffused light. Background noise in crowded markets or bustling transit hubs, once easily filtered, now intrudes, fracturing concentration. The ability to stay vigilant against pickpockets, to monitor departure boards for last-minute changes, or to follow a tour guide's instructions without mental drift diminishes. The mind, once a master of selective focus, now struggles to maintain coherence in chaotic environments. Problem solving, the cornerstone of travel resilience, loses its fluidity. A missed connection, a canceled reservation, or a sudden border requirement that would have been a solvable puzzle in younger years now feels like an insurmountable obstacle. The creative flexibility that once improvised solutions, finding alternate routes, bargaining for better prices, or charming your way out of bureaucratic snags, now stiffens into rigidity. The mental pathways that once branched into multiple solutions now narrow, leaving you stranded when plans inevitably go awry. Language acquisition and retention, once a thrilling challenge, now feels like pouring water into a cracked vessel. New phrases slip away before they can take root, and the neural plasticity that once allowed you to mimic accents or absorb syntax hardens. Conversations that should be engaging become exhausting exercises in translation and recall, each sentence a laborious reconstruction rather than a natural exchange. The joy of connecting through language gives way to the fatigue of constant mental strain. Risk assessment, the subconscious calculus that once kept you safe in unfamiliar places, now misfires. The intuition that once warned of dangerous neighborhoods, untrustworthy strangers, or poorly maintained vehicles now lags, leaving you vulnerable to threats you might have instinctively avoided before. The brain's ability to rapidly synthesize subtle cues, body language, environmental red flags, tonal shifts in speech, deteriorates, leaving you exposed in situations where split-second judgment is the difference between safety and peril. Emotional regulation, once a steady rudder in the face of travel's inevitable frustrations, now wavers under stress. Minor inconveniences, a delayed flight, a rude clerk, a miscommunication, trigger disproportionate irritation or anxiety. The resilience that once allowed you to shrug off setbacks now crumbles, leaving you emotionally drained by challenges that would have been mere footnotes in younger years. The mind's ability to compartmentalize stress, to laugh off mishaps, or to reset after a bad day weakens, turning small hiccups into trip-ruining ordeals. Information overload, a constant in modern travel, now overwhelms where it once energized. The barrage of digital check-ins, QR codes, app-based navigation, and ever-changing regulations becomes a cognitive minefield. The mental bandwidth required to adapt to new technologies. Self-service kiosks, biometric scanners, ride-hailing apps, dwindles, leaving you dependent on assistance that may not always be available. The world, optimized for the quick thinking and tech savvy, now feels like it's accelerating past your ability to keep up. Situational awareness, the sixth sense that once kept you attuned to your surroundings, now dulls. The ability to monitor your belongings while conversing, to notice someone lingering too close, or to sense the shifting mood of a crowd erodes. The mind, once a vigilant sentry, now tires easily, dropping its guard at the worst moments. The street smarts that once shielded you from harm now fade, leaving you exposed in environments where awareness is the first line of defense. Cognitive fatigue sets in faster and lingers longer. What was once a full day of exploration now requires frequent mental breaks, moments of stillness to recalibrate. The stimulation of new sights, sounds, and routines, once invigorating, now exhausts, leaving you mentally drained by early evening. The restorative sleep that should reset the mind is itself disrupted by unfamiliar beds, time zones, or nighttime disorientation, creating a vicious cycle of depletion. The cumulative effect is a mind no longer suited to the demands of travel. The spark of curiosity that once propelled you into the unknown now fights against a thickening fog of hesitation. The world, once a playground of possibilities, now feels like a gauntlet of unseen pitfalls. The joy of discovery is overshadowed by the creeping awareness that the mind, like the body, has limits. And those limits are no longer negotiable. The modern obsession with bucket lists sells a dangerous lie. That fulfillment is measured in stamps on a passport. That a life well lived is quantified by how many sunsets you've witnessed from exotic beaches or how many famous landmarks you've checked off a spreadsheet. This consumerist approach to existence reduces profound experiences to mere collectibles, as if joy could be tallied like points in a game. The very concept turns travel into a hollow scavenger hunt, where the goal is not depth of understanding or genuine connection, but the frantic accumulation of superficial encounters. What these lists fail to acknowledge is the tyranny of expectation they impose. The Eiffel Tower, Machu Picchu, the Grand Canyon. These are not mere locations, but ideas sold to us as transcendent experiences, yet when you finally stand before them, the reality rarely matches the myth. Jet-lagged and jostled by crowds, you realize you've traded money, time, and comfort for a photo op. A fleeting moment that once captured leaves you no wiser or more fulfilled than before. The promised epiphany never comes, just another item crossed off, another box checked, with the gnawing question, was that it? Worse still, the bucket list mentality fosters a perverse kind of existential debt, the nagging sense that if you haven't been enough, you haven't lived enough. It turns leisure into obligation, transforming what should be a spontaneous pursuit of wonder into a grim checklist of duties. The pressure to see the world before it's too late ignores the truth that meaning isn't found in geography but in presence. A man who has walked every continent can still be shallow, while one who has truly known his own backyard may possess more wisdom than any globetrotter. The illusion is compounded by social media, where every journey is polished into a highlight reel. You see the curated smiles, the perfect angles, the blessed captions. Never the exhaustion, the disappointment, the loneliness of being a stranger in a strange land. Comparing your reality to these fabricated narratives breeds dissatisfaction, as if your own life is lacking because you haven't replicated someone else's carefully staged adventures. The bucket list then becomes less about personal fulfillment and more about performing for an audience that doesn't care. There's a deeper arrogance in the assumption that these places need you, that your presence at some overcrowded monument somehow enriches your soul or the world itself. The pyramids stood for millennia before you. They will stand long after. Your visit changes nothing, least of all you. Real transformation doesn't come from passive observation, but from engagement, from the slow, often uncomfortable work of learning, creating, or building. Yet the bucket list sells the fantasy that enlightenment is a product to be consumed, not earned. The fixation on doing it all also obscures the value of repetition, of returning to the same places with deeper understanding. A single meaningful conversation in a familiar cafe can hold more weight than a whirlwind tour of a dozen capitals. Mastery, intimacy, and true familiarity are impossible in the frantic rush from one bucket list item to the next. The shallow breadth of constant novelty leaves no room for the richness of depth. And for those in their later years, the bucket list becomes particularly cruel, a last-minute scramble to outrun mortality itself. But no amount of travel can postpone the inevitable, and the desperate attempt to see everything often leads to seeing nothing at all. The body tires, the mind struggles to absorb, and what should have been leisure becomes a stressful race against time. The real tragedy isn't the places left unseen, but the moments missed in the pursuit of them. The quiet afternoons, the unhurried conversations, the simple pleasures sacrificed at the altar of an arbitrary list.